The morning of March 18, 1925, was like any other for the small town of Murfreesboro, Illinois. But by the end of the day, the deadliest tornado ever recorded in U.S. history would destroy it, leaving 234 people dead. The devastating twister, known as the Tri-State Tornado, began in Missouri around 1 p.m.
So we know that the tornado started somewhere near Ellington, Missouri. That's in southeast Missouri, and it quickly raced northeast through basically the entire state of Illinois from west to east, and it lifted somewhere in Indiana. All said and done, it was a 219-mile track.
That's Kevin Deitch. He's a warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service. He says the tornado still holds records for the longest path and duration.
The duration of the tornado was actually 3.5 hours long. You think of a typical tornado that we would see 1, 5, maybe 10 minutes is kind of the more usual time frame. So for a tornado to be on the ground for 3.5 hours, this just shows the power that this tornado had.
The tornado is estimated to have been around 3/4 of a mile wide, so this stock footage of smaller tornadoes can't do it justice. No known photos or videos of the storm exist. The Tri-State Tornado began by destroying the town of Annapolis, Missouri, and several others, leaving at least a dozen dead. Christopher Allen Gordon, the director of library and collections at the Missouri Historical Society, says the storm then went over state lines.
And as it was moving, it seems to have built in intensity.
The tornado then reached Murfreesboro, Illinois, which Gordon says was absolutely devastated.
One of the really interesting accounts that we have of the tornado coming into Murfreesboro is actually a railroad engineer entering the city as the tornado is actually hitting Murfreesboro. And he describes seeing the town just like disintegrating as he's coming into town. And he said the wind and being pelted from this debris is actually shaking the train, and they decide to just go ahead and just plow through the debris trying to get to downtown Murfreesboro. And it comes to a stop, at the station, and he said just there's bodies lying in the street, the houses and buildings are just, totally collapsed.
The storm left over 200 people dead and a fire in its wake, but the tornado wasn't even close to being done. It continued to move east through DeSoto, Illinois.
DeSoto sadly holds the record of having the most student casualties in American history. So 33 students died when the tornado directly hit their school in the middle of the afternoon.
It then entered West Frankfort, Illinois.
West Frankfort at the time was a mining town. They had coal mines. Most of the men were at work that day underground, and they come out and they find that their town is just absolutely devastated, and their families, many of them lost their families, and so it's just one case after another of this devastation as it's moving across Illinois.
Finally, after 3.5 hours, the tornado gave out near Princeton, Indiana.
So this is the deadliest tornado that we have on record. 695 deaths and actually 2,027 injuries. So just a devastating tornado.
Deitch says the storm was formed in a supercell, which is what gave it so much power.
So supercell is basically the whole thunderstorm itself is rotating. And so out of supercell thunderstorms, we tend to get our worst weather.
With over 300 mile-per-hour winds, it is considered an F5 tornado. And while tornadoes like this still happen today, our warning systems are much better now than in 1925.
So there weren't warning systems in place in 1925. People relied on their own sense of really how to read the weather. They really had no really accurate models for predicting what the weather was going to be like, and certainly not these storm systems.
Buildings today are also much safer, and many homes in the Midwest have basements or storm shelters.
These homes were not constructed really in a manner that could hold up against such intense winds. So if it was enough to shake a steam engine while it's going down the railroad tracks, a wood frame home, even a brick home, would not have had a chance.
And though many Midwesterners like to step outside when there's a tornado warning, Gordon says we shouldn't take them lightly.
We kind of take the weather system warnings for granted nowadays, and I don't think that we should. You should always be aware of what the conditions are, because as we've seen in the past, the circumstances, the consequences can be devastating.
For Living St. Louis, I'm Veronica Moheski.